right, hello everyone. My name is Blake Conklin, and I'm presenting today along with Pol Bouratsis, and we are here on behalf of the Texas General Land Office's River Basin Flood Study, specifically within the Community Development and Revitalization team. So by a show of hands here, who has heard of the River Basin Flood Study before? Okay, a decent amount. So the first thing I want to start off with is talking about Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey is really the reason that the River Basin Flood Study was founded. And as someone who works in this field and has for some time, I think it's pretty easy to get desensitized to Hurricane Harvey and its impacts on Texas. So here on screen, I have some statistics from Hurricane Harvey. 49 counties in Texas, specifically along the coast and just inland of the coast, were impacted by Hurricane Harvey. These 49 counties received a presidential disaster declaration. About 1/3 of all Texans were impacted from this storm, and there was billions in damages as a result of Hurricane Harvey. So Hurricane Harvey was really the reason that this flood study came into place. So the River Basin Flood Study started in the fall of 2020, so about 4 years ago now. And it is led by the GLO CDR planning team, and their planning mission is to design and oversee planning studies to collect, analyze, and communicate disaster-related data to assist decision makers to better protect Texans from future disasters. And so the River Basin Flood Study really follows this mission statement by the GLO CDR team. So here on the right, you can see a map of where the River Basin Flood Study covers. So the 49 counties that received that presidential disaster declaration from Hurricane Harvey are within the eastern, central, and western region. And then there's also 4 additional counties in the lower Rio Grande Valley region that received funding in 2015 and 2016 from floods then. So the River Basin Flood Study is a 53 county wide study. It covers virtually the whole Texas coast except for 1 county. And then also several counties just inland of the coast. So you can see here in the western region, me and Paul are here on behalf of the western region of the study. In the southern region of the western region, which is here in blue, you can see where we are here today within like the Nueces Basin and Nueces Bay. So now I'll talk a little bit more about the study. So as I said earlier, the study really follows that planning mission from the GLO CDR team. And so the 3 main goals of the study are to accurately model and evaluate flood risks within the study areas, assist communities in developing cost-effective flood mitigation strategies, and then to determine potential funding sources for these projects. So you can see with the 53 county-wide study, it's a really large study, and this is certainly something that the GLO could not do themselves. So there are a lot of delivery partners and a lot of partnerships and coordination with other federal and state agencies and organizations to really enhance the study and expedite the study and make sure that all the correct technical partners are involved to make the study as useful as it can be. And then also, as you've been hearing throughout the conference today, there's a lot of other studies in the area, and so we want to make sure that we're coordinating with other studies to make sure we can leverage their data or they can leverage our data. So if there's been survey information at a bridge, we want to share that with other studies. And if there's already been outreach, for example, in a certain community and another study already has that data, we want to leverage that data instead of going out to that exact same community and asking the same questions that will lead to outreach fatigue. So you can see here all of the different organizations that the GLO has partnered with. That includes a lot of organizations that have been presenting at this conference, such as the Texas Water Development Board, USGS, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, TxDOT, FEMA, and some others. So here I have the timeline of the River Basin Flood Study. So as I said, it started in around the fall of 2020, and it is a 6-year-long study. So it's expected to end around the summer of 2026. So that's about 2 years from now. We are currently in the risk analysis and modeling phase of the study. So that's that middle bar in yellow. And so this is our longest phase of the study. And so this is where we really dig in and identify the areas that we want to model and then produce models for these areas. And then in future phases, we will continue to model projects and identify projects and then do alternatives analyses and then determine funding sources for these projects. So those will be our next two phases of the project. And then as you can see at the top, stakeholder engagement is really the forefront of this study. We want to be engaged with the communities as we are doing the River Basin Flood Study and make sure that the communities understand what we're doing, and also, we understand that the communities are the reason we're doing this study. We want to make sure that we're really engaged with them and partnering with them so we can give them the best results that will be useful for them. So now we'll go a little bit more into modeling updates for the coastal bend and kind of downstream area of the Nueces Basin. So here on screen is an outline of the West region. So you can see all 25 counties that are within West region. And then we have our 17 watersheds that we are modeling. So with the limited funding that we have for the West region, we're not able to model the entire region. We did a risk analysis to determine the highest risk areas, so that way we could use those for modeling. And then you can see there on the bottom are the 5 watersheds or areas that we are modeling that are within Nueces Basin. So those include the city of Corpus Christi, Aransas Pass, Mustang Island, and Upper Laguna Madre, and then also Oso Bay. So those first 4, so everything except for Oso Bay, we are currently modeling as part of phase 3, which is our modeling phase, and we're about 75 to 80% complete on those models, which means they're substantially complete. The models are pretty much done. They're just undergoing a pretty rigorous review process to make sure everything is good with them. And then for Oso Bay, that was actually completed in a previous phase as a pilot study to test out all of the procedures and standards that we're implementing currently. And then it is about over 25% complete on a pilot of the alternatives analysis, which is the identification of mitigation projects. And so that will help lead us into the next phase of our study. And so with that, I will turn it over to Paul to give an update on modeling.
Thanks, Blake. All right, hi everyone. So in this next part of the presentation, we will focus on these 5 study areas that Blake mentioned, which are at or near Nueces County. And we will take a look at some of our modeling results, which are still preliminary. So our models for all of these 5 studies were built with Checkres 2D. While developing these models, we considered the best available data that we received from the county, local municipalities, the Texas Water Development Board, and the Army Corps of Engineers. The data we received included hydraulic and drainage studies and models, but also some good survey data and high water marks. For our calibration, we considered a range of different historical events, and obviously we included some of the major flood events, such as Hurricane Harvey. And we built models to simulate 3 main scenarios. Scenarios of surge flooding, rainfall flooding, or compound flooding of combined rainfall and surge. This sketch here shows an example of an area that experienced these 3 types of flooding, with surge flooding near the shore, rainfall or riverine flooding further away, and compound flooding in that transition zone area in between. We start with Corpus Christi, and on the map here we see with a black boundary the boundary of our model, and then with the smaller colored polygons we see the census tracts, and the colors represent the number of National Flood Insurance Program claims within each tract. So the red color represents areas with National Flood Insurance Program or NFIP claims with a count of between 100 and 500. Yellow would be NFIB claims of between 50 and 100, and the other colors are a smaller number of claims. The Corpus Christi study area includes the downtown Corpus Christi area, the central city of Corpus Christi, the port and the industrial area next to the port, and the North Beach. The population is 350,000, and we know that in this study area there have been more than 200 NFIB claims. First, we'll look at the 100-year search simulation results, and we see that with the different shades of blue, we see water depth, and then with the various colored nodes, we see structures that are predicted to flood at this event. So for this 100-year surge-only simulation, we see predicted significant flooding in the North Beach area, flooding near the port and the industrial area. And then our simulation shows some limited wave overtopping of the flood walls and seawalls, which cause some, are predicted to cause some shallow flooding in the downtown area. And now this is a map of the rainfall-only simulation results. We see even more spread out and extensive flooding, mostly in the more inland parts of the city of Corpus Christi. In the North Beach, we see a reduction of flooding, and we still see, even for rainfall only, some flooding in the downtown area. And finally, we have the compound results with both rainfall and surge. So for the compound scenarios in all of these studies, we studied three different scenarios for its frequency event. We studied the scenario with high rainfall and low surge, one with low rainfall and high surge, and one with moderate rainfall and moderate surge. The results that we present here represent the combination of moderate rainfall and moderate surge. So we still see some pretty extensive and significant flooding throughout the entire study area in these compound results. Next, we have the Aransas Bay study area, which includes communities of Aransas Pass, Rockport, Fulton, Ingleside, and Ingleside on the Bay. The population is about 55,000, and there are more than 1,000 NFIB claims. Starting with the surge results again for the 100-year event, we see significant structural flooding in the Fulton, Rockport, and Aransas Pass areas, where structures are predicted to flood many times by more than 2 feet of water. All right, in the riverine scenario, we see more extensive flooding further inland in the same areas, but also in the southern part of Ingleside area, while the areas close to the shore have somewhat reduced flooding. And compound flooding shows a similar picture with, again, significant flooding in these same more denser areas within the study area. Next, we have the Mustang Island study area, which includes the city of Port Aransas and the Mustang Island State Park. The population is only 3,000, but we know that there have been more than 1,000 NFIB claims. In the surge condition results, we see that most of the area or the entire area experiences it's predicted to experience significant flooding. Almost every structure within the area is at risk of surge flooding, and many of these structures are predicted to flood by more than 2 feet of water. Then in the rainfall-only event, we see somewhat reduced flooding within the city of Port Aransas, and a very similar picture with the compound flooding results. My clicker might need new batteries, I think, but there we are. All right. And finally, the upper Laguna Madre study area. which includes parts of the city of Corpus Christi and parts of Padre Island. The population is about 21,000, and there have been more than 1,000 NFIP claims. In the surge-only event, there is concentrated flooding on both sides of Laguna Madre in the Flower Bluff area of Corpus Christi and in Padre Island. The rainfall flooding is less significant, and the compound flooding is also less significant than the coastal one. All right, so everything we presented so far represents baseline modeling conditions, but the next phase, like Blake said, will be to use these modeling results, identify the areas of highest flooding risk within our region, come up with a list of appropriate potential flood mitigation projects, and then perform alternatives analysis to evaluate them and find the best strategy for flood mitigation in its high-risk area. So far, we have started working on this front on a pilot study, which is set on the Oso Creek, Oso Bay watershed. And this is a map of this watershed for our pilot study. So the first thing we did is we analyzed our baseline modeling results. We reviewed the location and count of predicted flooding structures under both current conditions, but also under future conditions. And we also consider factors such as the social vulnerability index, low to moderate income factor, and the location of critical infrastructure within the watershed. And using all this data, we identified 7 areas of high risk, which we call clusters here on this slide. And for each one of these clusters, we are considering a range of different flood mitigation projects. Some of them are traditional structural projects, such as levees or channel improvements. Others are non-structural projects, such as flood warning systems. And others are nature-based solutions, such as projects that involved naturalized floodplains. So this pilot study will give us the information that we need to better streamline the entire phase of alternatives analysis that we will perform in the entire West region. But we are also finding some projects that are able to mitigate flooding in this study area. Last thing I want to mention is, like Blake said, we are definitely taking into consideration existing and ongoing studies. Specifically, 2 noteworthy studies include the tri-state Nueces Basin study in this area that has recommended some projects already, and also the stormwater master plan for the city of Corpus Christi. We are making sure to not recommend the same project or even a similar project, and we're also making sure to not recommend projects that would be in conflict with the ones that have already been recommended. We proceed our analysis, and we expect to have more results for this alternatives analysis soon. And with that, I think I can pass it back to Blake to continue with the rest of the presentation.
All right, so as I showed earlier on that map of the 25 counties within West Region, not every county is receiving a flood model, but that doesn't mean that the GLO River Basin Flood Study cannot support you. We are here to support the entire West Region, whether or not you have a flood model. So here on screen, I have a few resources that the West Region has prepared. The first 2, Tips to Improve Grant Applications and Funding Resources Guide, these are both one-page documents that I actually have some with me. If you're interested, I can certainly hand those out. Unfortunately, AECOM does not have a booth, but I'm sitting in the back right corner of the conference room. And so here on the right, that screenshot is from our Funding Resources Guide. So it kind of breaks it down by what your project category is and the potential funding sources for that project and what those could be. And then we also have a training on nature-based solutions that is a recorded training that we have. So if you're interested in that, just, you can come up to either Paul or I, and we also have our outreach email at the end of this presentation. That's certainly your best spot to go if you have any questions or would like to see some of these materials. And then the last thing that we have is this fund match tool, which is currently being developed as part of the River Basin Flood Study, and it's designed to help match potential projects to potential funding sources to help kind of streamline and make that process a little easier for communities to find funding sources for their mitigation projects. And then I also want to go into engagement opportunities and resources. So as I showed earlier on that project timeline, community engagement and stakeholder engagement and outreach is really forefront for this project. Throughout the entire duration of the project, we have been conducting kickoff workshops and flood needs workshops and any sorts of outreach workshops that we can to engage with the communities throughout West Region. So you can see here on the map all of the areas that, or all of the data that we've collected through these workshops. And also getting to come present at conferences like these and share our results and where we're at with the study. And so our really big push for this year in 2024, especially as we're beginning to look into phase 4, which is that alternatives analysis phase, we want to stand up and build these community advisory groups. And so what those community advisory groups are, we kind of have 3 main objectives for these community advisory groups, and that is to help recommend projects, validate models, and fill data gaps. So as Paul was saying, we're currently doing our baseline modeling on our selected watersheds, but as we go into phase 4 for alternatives analysis, we'll continue to model and continue to build up these models as we do our alternatives analysis and project identification. So it's still a perfect time for us to add more information to the models that we receive from our community advisory group. And we also want projects recommended from our community advisory group. As we're going into alternatives analysis, the last thing we want to do is waste time and waste money modeling a project that a community at the end of the day is not going to want. We want to hear from communities on what kinds of projects they want us to model. So that way, at the end of the River Basin Flood Study, we're able to then give communities these models and these project ideas that the community wants and will then go out to receive funding. So if you're interested in joining the community advisory group, or you might know someone who is interested, please come up to me after this presentation. I do have an interest form. Just because you fill it out, it does not mean that you're now forced to be in the community advisory group. All it is an interest form. And then also, we have our outreach email up here on screen. It is monitored all the time by our outreach team. It's the best place to go if you have any questions about the River Basin Flood Study or you would like to be involved. And I think that's all I have for you today.
All right, I have a few questions. From the audience. First one was, how were the watersheds selected for this inclusive modeling study?
So I don't know if I can answer the full question. Neither Paul or I were involved in that process. It was done in a previous phase of the study, but it was done through, if I can go back on screen. I know one of the main data sets that we looked at were NFIP claims and finding those high-risk areas based on the number of claims, and then also through existing floodplains to determine the areas of highest risk.
Does the 2D flood modeling in Corpus Christi include the limitation of the subsurface drainage systems?
So for consistency purposes, we chose to use HECRAS for the entire program of RBFS, which obviously, for those who are modelers, know that it does not have capabilities for storm sewer modeling. But we did use some assumptions both in our geometry setup and in our hydrology to take into consideration this underground storage and conveyance. We consider this study a feasibility level, high-level study, which will be able to identify the risk areas and potentially some preliminary screening of appropriate projects. But for areas like Corpus Christi, we do recommend subsequent, more detailed, localized modeling with software that will consider this storm sewer drainage as well.
Was there a focus on water quality in any part of this coastal ecological system?
Well, it's not the primary purpose of the project to consider water quality, but we, in our phase 4 in our alternatives analysis, we do prioritize and will focus on nature-based solutions that we expect to also have water quality benefits.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Oh, one in.
Thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to thank through y'all the General Land Office for all the assistance they have given our communities, especially on CDBG mitigation funding and that support. But one of the problems, and I want to ask y'all if y'all can extend your study just a little bit and push it where part of the problem is, when we talk about funding, there's a lot of funding that's available to us. Keep in mind that most cities in Texas are 5,000 less in population. And those cities do not have the capacity, one, to even apply for this funding, or two, if they're fortunate enough to get the funding, they can't even implement the funding and manage the grant itself. So that is a huge problem that we have been, advocating for at our Council of Government. We've taken this to the American Flood Coalition at the national level. And Mayor Amon and I were very fortunate to be in Washington, D.C. at American Flood Coalition conference with other mayors throughout the country. And just simple things. When we heard from FEMA, the director of the mitigation, hazardous mitigation of FEMA said, there's so many projects out there that are duplicate. Like you can apply for BRIC funding and you should be also applying for IIJA. But here's the problem. Those applications are completely different. It takes days and months to fill out one. So just taking those simple ideas, and we were able to go lobby Senator Cornyn, Senator Cruz, our various representatives while we were up there, and say, can you just even have one application? So when we have one application, it goes to the BRIC funding or the building resiliency, and it goes to the IIJA. Can we just make this process simple? Because if we can, then that funding is going to start flowing to where we really, really need this. And the other thing, too, is that we need to think of flooding and water as water basins and not necessarily city limits or county limits. This is a basin. And so when you start having to look at low to moderate income and where this funding needs to be, that may not be the right answer to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Thank you, gentlemen.